All right, as mentioned, today we're going to start on the JavaScript portion of the class. I have graded your midterms. I will give them back. They're right here. I will give them back in just a little while. I've decided to change this around a little bit. What I mean is this. Remember, Friday we're having 40 students come in from Fort Zumwalt High School. That doesn't work then very well for having a hands-on test on that day. It just wouldn't work. So we're not going to. What I'm going to do today is I'm literally going to spend hopefully just a couple minutes on Chapter 1, the Introduction to Web Development, because most of that's review. All I want to touch on is the new stuff, the JavaScript stuff in jQuery. Then we'll go over Chapter 2 and Chapter 3. All right? We should be able to do that and still have at least an hour left of class. I will also give you the test review today for Chapter 2. Then tomorrow we will take a written test on Chapter 2. And on Friday we will take a written test on Chapter 3. The other thing we're going to do on Friday, and we don't have that much time because the students are going to be coming in here as of like 10 o'clock, if not earlier, is I'm going to show you that balsamic wireframe tool, and we're going to look at some wireframing. All right, we're going to do that. Then next Monday, which is the 29th, if I've got my dates right, next Monday, we will, on Monday, we will be going over the, we will have our hands-on test for Chapters 2 and 3. There'll be nothing I'm grabbing from Chapter 1. All right, so it'll be just on 2 and 3. All right. I'll try to have it written by Friday so I can give you some kind of an idea as to what's going to be on it. So again, the idea today is an introduction to web development, getting started with JavaScript, and the essential JavaScript statements. What I don't have today, but what I will have tomorrow, are a boatload of examples. We'll look at some examples today also. All right. And tomorrow I'm going to literally give you what we're going to be doing for the labs and the homeworks for the rest of the semester. All right, I will give all that to you. There'll be, each one of them will be in a PDF. All right. So with that said, let's just jump into Chapter 1. As you can see, Section 1, which is the first 7 chapters, is on JavaScript Essentials. I'm not going to read this to you. Again, Chapter 1 is a review of website development. We're just going to concentrate on what's new, what we haven't talked about before. Chapter 2 is our beginning of the jump into JavaScript. Chapters 3 and 4, it continues. Chapter 5 is on debugging. All right. Chapter 6 will be on the DOM. Chapter 7 will be on images and timers. Then when we get done with Chapter 7, of course, we'll go into Chapter 8. Then we jump over from just plain JavaScript to jQuery. All right. So when you look in here, if you look on the screen, as far as what do I care about? Well, page 10, how JavaScript is used for client-side processing. Page 18, the JavaScript. All right. And page 32, how to test a JavaScript application. This book, in this book, the author uses an editor called Aptana. There's nothing wrong with Aptana at all. It's not a bad editor. Not the one I use, but it's not bad. But anything that he does in here on Aptana, I'm just going to skip it. You want to download it, you can get a free version of it yourselves and use that, feel free. All right. You can also keep using Atom if you're using that, Notepad++ if you're using that, or whatever. All right. So I'm going to jump, like I said, right into page 10 here. How JavaScript is used for client-side processing. The first thing to realize, as it says there, is JavaScript is a scripting language. What that means is it can do basically anything that any programming language can do. All right? Except once in a while there's a few things that it doesn't interact with as well as a, quote, typical real programming language, unquote. All right. So they show you this picture in the book. This is the kind of thing that we are going to do. All right. What my hope is, I've got to work on this weekend, what I'm about to tell you. But what my hope is starting next week, I let Evan know. He didn't get back to me with any kind of comment. But what I'd like to do starting next week is for part of one class period per week, we're going to create our own website as a class. Not going to worry about Bootstrap. We're just going to write it regular with HTML, with CSS, but we're going to put JavaScript in it too. All right? And I'm not saying it's funny, it's interesting, it's quaint, it's cute. It's just something I've decided to do. All right? Now, one of the things that you can do, and that we will talk about eventually, are things like image swaps and rollovers. And if you say, I don't know what this means, yeah, you do. All right? And I've even given you examples. I remember that one of the ones that I saw, one of the first times I saw this, my wife was like, do you want to go into Weight Watchers? And she had me go out to weightwatchers.com. And they had a picture of an individual right here. All right? It was a young man. And if you took your mouse and you put it over the young man, you got before and after pictures. So when you moused in, you look thin. When you moused out, you look bigger, type of an idea. All right? Now, you can use JavaScript and jQuery for a lot of things. One thing that probably I didn't maybe do as stellar a job as I would have liked to on that, but if you remember when we had the chapter on forms, all right, that if we wanted a field to be required, we could just put the word required in there. Boom. It's required then. If we wanted a telephone number to be in a certain way, we could put a regular expression in there, etc. All right? That's using the actual tools built into HTML5 to do that. You can also do validation using JavaScript. We will do some of that. All right? Image swaps and rollovers, I already mentioned. Slideshows, you've already seen. You've already been working with those. Again, before there was Bootstrap, you did your slideshows using JavaScript. All right? Am I going to make you do that? I hope not. All right? Why? Because it's much easier to do it with Bootstrap. With Bootstrap, there's a lot of setup with carousel this and inner and all the other stuff, but it's much more seamless to work on it, I think at least, when you work on it with Bootstrap. All right. And the other thing to remember, jQuery is a JavaScript library. jQuery is JavaScript, but it's thousands of lines of JavaScript code that have been written to try to make your life easier. All right? Now, one thing is, if you remember, I've sent you out to this site before. Anybody remember what this stands for? W3C? Anybody remember that? It's what? No, it's W3C is the World Wide Web Consortium. The W3 is www, World Wide Web. The C is consortium. They're basically in charge. They make recommendations that virtually every browser manufacturer brings in as law, so to speak. But they can't make people do anything. The W3C has never ordered anybody, to my knowledge, to do anything. It's kind of like when I talk to my kids and I tell them to do something. Do I have to? Well, I can't make you do anything. All right? But basically, most browser manufacturers, when the W3C comes out with recommendations, they follow them. The reason I'm telling you that is the W3C is basically in charge of HTML and it's in charge of CSS. It is not in charge of JavaScript. In fact, sometimes you'll see this ECMA right there. And most people don't know what ECMA stands for, but as mentioned here, it's the European Computer Manufacturers Association. They're the ones who actually develop the JavaScript standards. Now, some of that stuff you can still get, and you're still told to adhere to it by the W3C. But the point is, it's ECMA who's in charge of it, not the W3C. All right, it's been around for a long time. It's in its 6th version. And I wanted to show you, too. I don't want to waste my time or yours. I mentioned this the other day, that as we go through this, if you're having problems, I would go to the tutorials and go to the JavaScript one, learn JavaScript, and it's pretty good on W3 Schools. They also have one out here when we get to that point. They have a tutorial on learning jQuery. That's pretty good. All right? But the only other thing I want to say as far as that goes, and again, I don't care whether you listen to what I'm saying here or not, but if you're looking for more or less kind of the ultimate or the consummate site on JavaScript, you can go out here. This has got much more than you'd probably ever need, but it's right there. All right. Developer.mozilla.org/en for English -us -docs -web -javascript. That literally, if you go out there and you can look along the side here, that should have information on virtually anything that's JavaScript. All right. I mean, that's what, if I were you, I'd go out there and you go out to the site now and bookmark it. Do whatever you want to do. But what I'm saying is if you're in doubt over what something is, etc., that's a terrific place to start to look. All right? Now, they give you some history. I don't care. All right? I don't think it's really all that important, to be honest with you. One thing to realize, it says later in this chapter, you'll learn how to provide cross-browser compatibility. Well, again, this probably won't surprise you, but in the past, when there was non-compatibility, it was the rest of the world and Microsoft. Because Microsoft decided to do things in a certain way, and then the W3C came up and said, hey, everybody ought to do this. And Microsoft said, well, we don't think so. So they kept doing things their own way, so you had to write extra code for later or for earlier versions of of Internet Explorer. Since then, they've come around and everybody basically agrees with the way that everything is done. All right? All right. Again, I'm not going to go over, if we just wrote HTML with no CSS, it would look like that, right? You know that by now. You know how to use CSS to come in there and link stuff up so you can make it look more like that. All right? Again, that shouldn't be anything new to any of you. But what is new is what's in here. It's the JavaScript. Now, I'm going to take a couple minutes and go over most of this JavaScript. It may not make hardly any sense to you right now, and that is okay. I mentioned to you yesterday that this line, this code that you see right here, this says anytime you use a $, you're using $, and you're replacing this. So if I say $, for example, single quote, £, I don't know, hello. All right? Something like that. That's a shortcut for saying document.getElementById, hello. Does that make sense? That's all it is it's an alias. All right. Then the next thing that's here, and again, like I said, may not make much sense, but if we look up on the screen right here, this thing, this is called email address 1, email address 2, and name. Okay? So why am I telling you that? Well, if you look down here, for email address 1, what they're saying is this value right there is that value right here. This value, the second one, is that value, oops, right? So that's the first one, and that's the second one. Does that make sense? All right. And why is that important? Because now, since we're putting them into variables, we can manipulate them programmatically. All right. And you might think, well, is that a big thing? It can be. What you can do is if a user does something they shouldn't be doing, if they put something in a form they shouldn't, you can literally change what they put in there if you need to do that. All right? So when we come in here, notice it says function. We'll talk about what functions are in just a bit. But after the word function, there's just parentheses. That function does not have a name. Okay? Some books call it an unnamed function. Usually you call it an anonymous function because it doesn't have a name. All right? So what these two things are doing, this says grab whatever is in that first text box right there and stick it into a variable named address, email address 1. Then it says grab the second one, stick it into something called email address 2. Then the next line creates a variable that's called a Boolean variable. Boolean is true, false. All right? Oftentimes, Booleans start with is. They don't have to, but they do. For instance, is married. All right? And you got to realize with a computer, there's no gray area. You know, you hear the jokes, well, yeah, my girlfriend's kind of pregnant. No, your girlfriend is pregnant or your girlfriend is not pregnant. All right, that kind of thing. To the computer, it's true or it's false. All right? And we're going to take a look at a lot of that kind of stuff as we go on. So we've got a variable we're creating that we're saying is valid, and we're assuming that it is valid, so we're setting it equal to true. So what this says is, hey, if we put nothing in here, so in other words, if we left this field right here where that says grace@yahoo.com, if instead of that we left it blank, all right, if we left it blank, then what would happen is this thing that's over here that currently has nothing in it, nothing on the side there, it would come out and it would say this field is required. And now it's not valid anymore because we didn't put anything in there, so we'd set is valid equal to false. All right? Otherwise, there's no error, so we set it equal to nothing. Then we check to make sure the first two email addresses are the same. If they're not, you get an error message. If they are the same, you get no message. Then we check that last box that had the name in it, and we say if that's empty, say this field is required. Otherwise, no message. So what we're doing here in that little bit of code is we're validating to make sure there's something in there, there's something in there, what's in these two boxes must be the same, and there's something in there. So if I put, for example, grace@yahoo.com, and then come in here again and put grace@yahoo.com, then those two will be the same, and let's say we put in here Grace. All right? Then if we click join our list, it's going to validate all those fields. It's going to say, yeah, there's something in there, yeah, there's something in there, and they're the same, yeah, there's something in there, it's all valid. But if we either, let's say we just did this, and we just said .co, we'd get this error message. The entry must equal the first, because now they don't. So is valid would be equal to false. If we leave this blank, we'd get this message. This field is required, and is valid would be false. So when we are validating, we're looking to make sure we're following all the rules that we set. And you can imagine that if you go out and you're filling out a form on the internet, and they've got a bunch of fields that have an asterisk by them that say required, and you leave something off, and you press a button to submit it, you're going to get an error message. And that's exactly what we're doing right here. All right? So then when we get to this point, we're saying, hey, if it is valid, submit it. That's it. All right? The stuff that's here, we'll talk about that a little bit later. That's a little harder probably to comprehend. But we will get into all of this stuff. All right. So they talk about HTML5 and the semantic elements. That's a good review if you're still a little bit confused on any of the stuff that's in there. Div and span, if you don't know when to use div as opposed to when to use span. The basic attributes, so IDs and classes, etc. This ID that we've been using, IDs, there's going to become even more important in JavaScript. Anything on a web page that we give an ID to, we will be able to use that get element by ID thing I mentioned yesterday, and we'll be able to manipulate it programmatically. All right? That'll be in a few chapters. Then they talk about the CSS skills that you need. Again, that's all stuff that you've seen before. Okay? Then they talk about running a JavaScript application. We're actually going to write one by the end of the period today, all right, if not more than one. Okay, but you run this, you're running the index page, and boom, the JavaScript's right in there. We already talked about what that is. You know the components of a URL. There's nothing new in there. All right? What's going to happen, just so you're aware of this, if you'd look up on the screen, please, that occasionally you're going to run a JavaScript program and nothing's going to happen. And you're like, I don't know what the hell's wrong. When that happens, not if, when. It happens to everybody. The best thing to do is to hit your F12 key, which is going to bring this up. And then those are your developer tools. And then what you'll want to do in your developer tools, come on, let me pull you up. Well, I want to make that bigger, but there we go. All right. Now look at that. That's not even my stuff. But the point is, you'll want to click on console. So when you hit F12 to bring up the developer tools and you go to console, it'll show you your error messages on your page. All right? It may or may not tell you how to fix them. Sometimes the error messages are going to be really good. You'll look at, oh, geez, I spelled that wrong, or whatever. Other times they're going to be, for lack of better words, obtuse. So you're going to look at it and go, what the hell is that? This has gotten so much better over the years. It used to be that when you had major errors, it would give you one error. It would be at the bottom line on your page, and it would basically say an error has occurred. So if you had a 500-line program, you'd get an error on line 500 that would say that. Then you had to figure out what the error was yourself. It's gotten so much better over the years. Again, for that cross-browser compatibility, this is a little bit old, but when you look at it, all right, what they're saying here is, I think 500 is the best. You know, for lack of better words, they're saying when you can use Chrome. I still think you're best off in this class, you're best off in this program, using Chrome all the time. All right? That is my very biased opinion. And the rest of the chapter here is on Aptana. So I'm not going to talk about any of that at all. All right? All right. I'm going to stop this run, start another one. So give me just a second here.